You're listening to Quiet Horizons, a podcast of original science fiction stories written for the hours when the day is done. From here, there are no interruptions, just one complete story, beginning to end. Literary, unhurried, and best experienced with your eyes closed. Tonight's story begins now. Part 1. The time machine did not look like anything. This was by design. Daniel Marsh had spent 4 years building it in the basement of his house in Tucson, and he had made the deliberate aesthetic choice to construct it as a workbench, a broad, unremarkable surface of steel and Baltic birch, cluttered with instruments that looked like instruments and wiring that looked like wiring, and nothing that looked like a portal through the fabric of space-time. He had done this partly for security and partly out of a kind of stubbornness. The machines in films looked the way they did because filmmakers needed audiences to understand at a glance what they were looking at. Daniel did not need to be understood at a glance. He needed the thing to work. It worked. He had confirmed this 3 times before he attempted anything consequential. First with a ceramic coffee mug, which he sent backward 12 minutes and recovered from the corner of the basement where he had mathematically predicted it would arrive, unbroken, containing the residual thermal signature of coffee that had been poured into it 12 minutes in the future. Second with a data recorder which he sent forward 6 hours and retrieved the following morning from the space behind the water heater where the displacement field had deposited it, containing a complete recording of the 6 hours it had spent there, which was 6 hours of nothing except the sound of the water heater cycling. Third, with himself, a 30-second excursion backward into Tuesday morning that left him standing in his own kitchen, watching his past self pour that same ceramic mug of coffee and carry it downstairs, never noticing the version of himself standing silent by the refrigerator. The machine worked. He was 51 years old. He had spent 22 years as a theoretical physicist at the University of Arizona before his theories became too strange for the department's comfort, and he had taken early retirement rather than moderate them. He had 2 ex-wives, the first an epidemiologist named Sandra, who had left because he worked too much, the second an architect named Celia, who had left because he had changed, become someone quieter and more inward, spending evenings in the basement instead of with her. He had 1 son, Owen, who was 23 and lived in Portland and called approximately twice a month in the distracted, affectionate way of young adults who loved their parents but were building their own lives and did not have much room for the older ones yet. He was not, by any standard inventory, a happy man. He was, however, an interested one. He had always been interested in things. Interest had sustained him through both divorces and the retirement and the long years in the basement, and he trusted it more than he trusted happiness, which he had experienced intermittently and found it did not last as well. He had built the time machine because the physics said it was possible and because he had a specific thing he wanted to fix. The thing he wanted to fix was this. On March 14, 2003, at approximately 3:20 in the afternoon, Daniel Marsh had been driving south on Oracle Road in Tucson and had run a yellow light that turned red while he was in the intersection. A woman in a green Honda Civic had entered the intersection from the cross street and had braked hard enough to stop before hitting him, and as he had driven away, he had seen her in his rearview mirror, stopped in the intersection with both hands over her face, clearly shaking. He had not stopped. He had told himself she was fine, the cars had not touched, no damage had been done. He had driven to the university and taught his 3:30 seminar in quantum field theory and eaten dinner and watched television and gone to sleep. And he had thought about the woman with her hands over her face approximately once a week for the following 22 years. This was the thing he wanted to fix. Not a catastrophe. Not a death or a crime or a ruined life. At least not one he could confirm. Just a moment of cowardice dressed as practicality, a failure of the ordinary human responsibility to stop and say, "I'm sorry, are you all right?" and the long compounding interest of not having done it, which had become over the years a small chronic pain somewhere in his moral architecture, a weight he had adjusted around rather than removed. He was aware this was disproportionate. He was aware that a physicist who had cracked the problem of temporal displacement had perhaps set his ambitions too modestly in choosing to correct a traffic incident from 2003. Several people, if they had known, would have found it funny. He found it clarifying. He did not want to go back and kill Hitler. He did not want to save a loved one or prevent a tragedy or alter the course of history. He wanted to do the small, correct thing that he had failed to do when it cost him something. He wanted to stop the car. The displacement event took 90 seconds. He had programmed the coordinates carefully, the intersection of Oracle and Roger, March 14, 2003, 3:21 p.m., displaced to a position 30 feet east of the northbound lane to avoid materializing in traffic. He had dressed in clothes that would not stand out in 2003. Jeans, a gray t-shirt, running shoes. He had brought no phone, no wallet, nothing that would look wrong in that year. He arrived in the gap between a parked delivery truck and a concrete wall, which was not where he had aimed but was close enough and, importantly, was private. The air smelled different, less particulate, more raw, the particular atmosphere of a city before certain things happened to it that he could not yet name. The light was the same Tucson winter light he remembered, pale gold and horizontal. The intersection was 40 feet away. He walked to the curb and watched himself run the light. The green Civic braked. He could see the driver from here, a young woman, brown hair, maybe 30, her face going white as the two cars came near each other. His past self's car moved through and continued south, oblivious. The Civic sat in the intersection, the driver with her hands over her face. Daniel crossed the street. He tapped on the window. She startled badly, pressed back against her seat, and then looked at him with eyes that were wet and searching. He made a small gesture, rolled down the window, and she did, reluctantly. "I saw that," he said. "I'm sorry. The other driver should have stopped. Are you all right?" She blinked. She seemed to be deciding whether he was a threat. "I'm fine," she said, and he could hear that she was not, quite, but that she would be. That the word was more of a forecast than a current report. "Do you need a minute? I can stay on the curb until you're ready to drive." She looked at him a moment longer. Something in her face settled. "No, I'm okay. Thank you for stopping." "Of course," he said. He watched her drive away, then he walked back to the space between the truck and the wall and returned to 2025. He was standing in his basement when he noticed the first thing. The workbench looked the same, the instruments looked the same, the low hum of the fluorescent light above the stairs was the same. But on the wall beside the shelving unit where he kept his component stock, there was a framed photograph that he did not remember owning. It was a photo of Owen. Owen, at maybe 8 years old, on a beach somewhere, holding a hermit crab up to the camera with the gleeful expression of a child showing an adult something the adult is supposed to be impressed by. Daniel's ex-wife Sandra was visible at the edge of the frame, laughing. The photo itself was not remarkable. What was remarkable was that he had never owned it, had never had a print made of it, and did not know how it had come to be hanging on his basement wall in a simple black frame. He stood and looked at it for a while. Then he went upstairs. Part 2. The kitchen was the same. He stood in it and turned slowly, the way he stood in Starfield's trying to read the composition. The layout was the same. Refrigerator, stove, the long counter with the window above the sink that looked out over the backyard. The appliances were the same model and color. But there was a plant on the counter that he did not own, a trailing pothos in a terracotta pot, clearly healthy and regularly watered, and beside the stove, held to the refrigerator door by a magnet from a restaurant he had never visited, was a child's drawing, a house, a son, a stick figure family of 3, with the word Dad written in crayon below the tallest figure. Owen was 23. Owen had not made crayon drawings in 15 years. Daniel removed the drawing carefully from the magnet and held it. The crayon was waxy with age, slightly faded, the paper soft at the edges from handling. It had been handled many times. It was the kind of thing you kept. He put it back. In the living room, there were more books on the shelves than he remembered. He was sure of that without being able to name which ones were new. The furniture was the same, except for a throw blanket folded over the arm of the couch, blue and substantial, which he did not recognize. There was a second mug on the coffee table, half full of cold tea, which was impossible because he lived alone. He went through the house systematically. He was a scientist. He catalogued the second mug of tea, the pothos on the kitchen counter, the drawing on the refrigerator, the photograph in the basement, in the bathroom, 2 toothbrushes instead of 1, in the bedroom closet, clothing that was not his, a woman's clothing, practical and unshowy, occupying approximately 1/3 of the closet space with the settled, organized confidence of things that had been there for a long time. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the closet for several minutes. He was apparently not alone. He handled this the way he handled professional problems, which was to gather more data before forming hypotheses. His phone was on the bedside table. His phone, the same physical device he had carried downstairs before the displacement, the scratched case and the cracked lower corner of the screen. He unlocked it and read it carefully. His contacts list was mostly the same, mostly. There were several names he didn't recognize and one name he did recognize but associated with a different context. A physicist at MIT he had known distantly in graduate school, now listed simply as Priya, no last name, with a frequency of contact that suggested she was not a professional acquaintance. His photo library had been reorganized, or rather, it contained photographs he had not taken. He scrolled back carefully, looking at the dates. The earliest divergence appeared to be around 2007, photos he did not remember from a camping trip he did not remember taking, his own face younger and less careful, standing at a canyon rim with a woman he did not know who was laughing and leaning into his shoulder. Not Sandra, not Celia, someone else entirely. He went to his text messages. The most recent thread was labeled Owen, and he read it from the beginning. Not the most recent exchange, but the full visible history, scrolling upward through years of messages. And what he found was different in character from the Owen he knew. Not different in personality. Owen's voice was the same, the particular dry humor of him, the way he spelled out words that most people abbreviated. But the texture was different, more familiar somehow, more prone to the random and unprompted, the way you texted someone when you thought of something funny and assumed they would want to know, not the careful, affectionate maintenance contact of a son who loved his father and called twice a month, but of someone in ongoing, easy relationship. In this version of events, Daniel and Owen seemed to be close. He sat with this for a long time. He walked to the corner market because he needed air. It was the same corner market. Same sign, same hours painted on the window, same arrangement of the produce just inside the door. The man behind the counter looked up when Daniel came in and said, "Dr. Marsh, morning," in the easy tone of a person who had said this many mornings, and Daniel said morning back, because this required no new information on his part. He bought coffee and a newspaper and stood outside for a while reading the newspaper. The date was today's date. The headlines were mostly the same as what he remembered. The world appeared to be running on the same track it had been running on when he left it an hour ago, the same slow complications and the same approximate weather. He turned to the back pages, the local section, reading carefully, looking for differences. They were there if you looked. A restaurant he remembered on 4th Avenue had closed. In its place, according to a brief item, was a gallery that had been open for several years. The name of a city council member was different. A community center he had driven past many times was described in a short article as having celebrated its 15th anniversary, which would mean it had been built 4 years earlier than he remembered. He folded the newspaper and drank his coffee and thought about a woman in a green Honda Civic who had driven away from an intersection in 2003 with the window rolled down and the stunned, slightly grateful look of someone who had just been shown an unexpected small kindness. What had she done afterward? Where had she gone? He did not know her name. He did not know anything about her. He had been in her presence for approximately 90 seconds, and whatever thread her life had been, wherever it led from that intersection in 2003, ran somewhere through the changed geometry of his morning without his being able to follow it. He walked home, thinking. Part 3. He called the number in his phone labeled Priya at 10 a.m., which felt like a reasonable hour, though he had no idea what she expected from him, or he from her, or what, in this version of events, their Tuesday mornings looked like. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, thought you were in the basement." Her voice was warm and specific, the voice of someone who knew how to talk to him. He registered this and filed it. "I went out for coffee," he said. "Can you talk for a minute?" "I've got a call at 10:30. What's up?" He had prepared for this. He had decided to proceed by asking questions that could be plausibly explained by distraction or tiredness, the standard camouflage of a person whose internal state was drastically different from their apparent external continuity. "I was thinking about the camping trip," he said. "Remind me which year that was." A pause. "Which one?" "The canyon one, with the photos." "Daniel, we've done 5 camping trips. You're going to have to be more specific." "The first one," he said. 2007, she said. "June. I burned the rice on the second night, and you pretended to eat it anyway. Why are you in a nostalgia spiral at 10 in the morning?" "I found some photos on my phone and lost track of time." "That's extremely you." He heard the smile in it. "Are you coming up for lunch, or should I plan to come find you at about 2 p.m. covered in solder and claiming you just need 5 more minutes?" "I'll come up," he said. "Noon." "Good. I'm making the salad with the peppers." She hung up. Daniel sat with the phone in his hand and thought about 5 camping trips and rice that had burned in June 2007, and the person in his house who watered the pothos and left tea to cool on the coffee table and had presumably, at some point, moved her clothing into his closet and his life. He went to his computer and searched his own email archive. He was looking for a thread that would tell him how they had met. He found it. 2006. A conference at Caltech. He remembered this conference, remembered attending it, did not remember her. But here she was in his inbox, an email 3 days after the conference from Priya Subramaniam at MIT saying, "Good talk, Marsh. I've been thinking about your third act problem, and I have some thoughts if you want them." And here was his reply. "I always want thoughts. What are you doing Thursday?" He read the exchange carefully. He had been clever, and she had been sharp, and after 6 emails they had made plans to have dinner in Cambridge, which he had no memory of attending. And from there, the archive showed the gradual warming of a correspondence that had over the following months become something other than professional. Something about the quantum entanglement formalism in his presentation, she had written in that first email. The way you're handling the non-locality. I think there's a gap, but it might be the interesting kind of gap. He had built a life with a woman who had noticed the interesting kind of gap in his work. In his other life, the life he remembered, he had been alone at that conference, had given the same talk, had driven to the airport and flown home, and over the following 2 years developed the quiet inwardness that Celia had found so hard to live with. Had gone alone into the basement and stayed there. Something had been different at the conference, something small. He couldn't identify it, and his email archive couldn't tell him, because whatever had caused Priya Subramaniam to email him instead of not emailing him was in the physics of a moment he had not been present for, the invisible downstream of something that had changed in March 2003. He tried to map it. He was a physicist. He understood systems, emergent behaviors, sensitive dependencies. He got out a legal pad and began drawing what he could reconstruct of the causal chain, working from the fixed point. A yellow light on Oracle Road, his past self not stopping, his present self going back and stopping in his place, outward into the network of effects. He had stopped. He had said, "Are you all right?" She had driven away. She had driven away differently than she otherwise would have, calmer, or perhaps not calmer, but accompanied in some way she hadn't expected to be. She had carried that small fact somewhere. She had done something she wouldn't otherwise have done, or not done something she would have, and whatever she had done or not done had sent a ripple through the network of her own connections, friends, family, colleagues, strangers at intersections, and some thread of that ripple had reached eventually the Caltech conference in 2006 and caused a physicist from MIT to be seated or not seated, to be present in a hallway or absent from one, to hear something in a presentation or leave before she heard it, and she had emailed him or had not, and he had a life now or had not. He could not trace it more precisely than this. The gap between cause and effect was too wide, the intermediate links invisible. He was working with endpoints, March 2003, and his kitchen this morning, without access to the path between them. He added items to the legal pad, the council member with the different name, the gallery on 4th Avenue, the community center built 4 years early. He did not know how to connect these to Oracle Road either, but he noted them because they were data, because data existed to be recorded, because the cartographer's instinct did not shut off. At noon he went upstairs. Part 4. She was standing at the kitchen counter with her back to him when he came up from the basement, cutting the red peppers that went into the salad. She was medium height, her hair short and dark with a few threads of gray, wearing a button-down shirt over jeans. She moved in the kitchen with the ease of someone who had been in this kitchen a long time. She heard him on the stairs and said without turning around, "You're on time. Shock?" "I said noon," he said. "You've said noon before." She glanced over her shoulder. "You look tired. Did you sleep badly?" He considered this. He had slept, as far as he could tell, the same as usual, but she was reading something in his face that in this version of events she had 17 years of experience reading, and whatever she was seeing was apparently notable. "I've been thinking hard," he said. "About the machine?" He sat down at the kitchen table. "Yes." She turned back to the peppers. "Is it working the way you expected?" This was, he realized, a significant piece of information. In this version of events, she knew about the machine. Of course she did. He had presumably been building it for the same 4 years, and she lived here, and she was a physicist. "Not exactly," he said carefully. "What happened?" "I made a test displacement, a small one." He paused. "The results were more complicated than I anticipated." She set down the knife and turned to look at him. She had a direct, evaluating quality to her attention that he recognized from her emails, projected now into the physical presence of her, and it was striking in the way that things were striking when they were both new and somehow already familiar. "Complicated how?" she said. "Some things changed," he said. "I don't know the full extent yet." She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her turning something over, weighing it. "Changed here. In the present." "Yes." "You went back to 2003, she said. It was not a question. He felt the careful, cold shock of this. She knew. She knew what he had been planning to fix, knew the specific target of it, and she had apparently, from within the context of this other life that he was only now inhabiting, let him go ahead with it. "You knew I was going to do it," he said. "We talked about it for 6 months, Daniel." "What did I decide in the end? About the risk?" She tilted her head slightly. "What kind of question is that?" "Humor me." "You decided the targeted change was small enough that the systemic effects would be minimal," she said. "You said the sensitivity of the system was bounded by the degree of causal centrality of the changed event. Oracle Road in 2003 was not a causally central node. You were confident." "I may have miscalculated," he said. She looked at him steadily. Then she turned back to the counter, picked up the knife, and continued cutting peppers. "Tell me what changed." He listed it. The photograph in the basement, the plant, the drawing, the clothing in the closet, her. He said all of it plainly, including the last item, because she had a right to know what he was navigating and because he was not willing to pretend at her expense. She was quiet for most of the recitation. When he finished, she said, "So you remember a version of events in which we never met?" "Yes." "And now you're in a version in which we've been together for 17 years and you have no experiential access to those years." "That's correct." She set the knife down again. She did not turn around. Her shoulders were level and her posture was still, and he could not read her. "Priya," he said. "I'm thinking," she said. He waited. "Here's what's interesting," she said finally, and turned. Her expression was controlled but not closed. There was something active in it, a genuine intellectual engagement that he suspected was characteristic of her, a default setting of problem orientation that had perhaps been one of the things. From my perspective, nothing changed. I remember everything: the camping trips, the conferences, the arguments, your mother's funeral, Owen's graduation, the first time you showed me the preliminary math on the machine. All of it. For me, continuity is intact. "Yes," he said. "So the displacement event created a divergence in experiential access but not in objective history, meaning the timeline consolidated. It didn't fork." "That's what it looks like." "Which means," she said slowly, "that somewhere in the downstream between Oracle Road in 2003 and a conference in Pasadena in 2006, your stopping that day caused something that caused something that caused something that put me in your orbit. And the history that resulted from that contact replaced the history that would have resulted from your absence. And you retained your previous memory set, while everything else, every other participant in the new history, retained theirs." "Yes." She was quiet again. Then she said, "That's terrifying." "I know." "You're a stranger in your own house." "Somewhat," he said. "The house is mine. The physics is mine. The work is the same. It's the perimeter that's changed." She looked at him with something that was both more and less than the feeling he had expected, something complicated and composed, the expression of a person who was deciding how to feel rather than reporting a feeling already formed. "Do you want to fix it?" she said. "Go back further, undo the 2003 change?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly. She nodded once, as if this was the right answer. "Eat lunch first," she said. "We can think more clearly on food." He sat at the table in his changed kitchen while she finished the salad, and he thought about Oracle Road and butterfly wings and the enormous, delicate web of things that connected one moment to another, the invisible infrastructure of a life. Part 5. Owen called at 2 p.m., which was earlier than usual. Daniel had excused himself from the kitchen after lunch and returned to the basement, partly to think and partly because the basement was familiar, his particular square footage of the world, the same in both versions. He was sitting on the stool at the workbench, not working, when his phone rang with Owen's name. "Hey," Daniel said. "Hey, are you busy?" "Not critically. What's up?" "Priya texted me," Owen said. "She said you were having a weird day, her words." Daniel considered this. She had texted Owen. That was information about the nature of their relationships here. Priya and Owen apparently communicated directly, had the kind of connection that led to welfare-checking texts when something seemed off. "I've been thinking about something," Daniel said. "The machine." It came up. "Did you test it?" "Yes." A pause. Then, in a different register. "And?" "It worked," Daniel said. "Some things changed." "Changed how?" Owen's voice was careful now, the way it went when he was managing something he wasn't sure how to manage. "Some things are better," Daniel said. He was aware, saying this, of the full weight of it, of the 17 years of camping trips and burned rice and the drawing on the refrigerator, of the particular easy frequency of these texts, of the way Priya had known to text Owen when something seemed off. "Some things I don't fully understand yet." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Daniel said. And unlike the woman in the green Civic, he meant it as a current report rather than a forecast. "I'm just readjusting." "Priya knows what's going on?" "Yes, we talked at lunch." "Good." Owen exhaled. "I've been thinking about it too, you know. The machine. What happens after?" "Tell me." "I used to worry about it when you first started building it. What you might change. What might disappear." A pause. "But then I figured, you wouldn't change anything that mattered. You don't work that way." You'd find the smallest thing, the most minimal intervention, and you'd do that, and whatever happened would be whatever happened. Another pause. Was I right? Yes, Daniel said. It was very small. And it still changed things. Yes. Well, Owen said. He sounded like he was smiling. Welcome to being human, I guess. Daniel sat with this. Outside the basement windows at ground level, he could see the legs of the rosebush he had planted along the back fence 8 or 9 years ago. He did not know if he had planted it in both versions of events or only this one. He thought probably both. He had always wanted a rosebush. Some things were invariant. Owen, he said. Yeah. When did we... He stopped, recalibrated. Do you remember the camping trip in 2007, the one where Priya burned the rice? Owen laughed, a sudden, genuine laugh. The rice incident, yeah, that was when I decided I liked her. She was already there, Daniel said. In 2007. You were, what, 9? 8. You brought her to the canyon trip and I thought it was going to be weird because Sandra had only been gone for a year and I had all these 8-year-old feelings about it. But she was just normal. She played cards with me for like 3 hours one night. We played war until it was basically dark and you fell asleep by the fire and she said you were the worst camping companion she'd ever had because you couldn't stay awake past 9. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. That sounds right. You're definitely having a weird day, Owen said, with a gentleness that was unexpected and exact. Call me tonight if you want to talk. I will. And Dad, whatever changed, it sounds like it might be okay. I think it might be, Daniel said. I think it might be okay. He hung up and sat on the stool for a long time. The rosebush moved slightly in the afternoon wind, its thorned canes dragging against each other with the soft, percussive sound that was one of the small sounds of his life. He had not known until this moment that he had been listening to it for years. Part 6. Over the following 3 days, he conducted what he privately called the inquiry. He was careful and methodical about it. He was, at his core, a scientist, and even the investigation of one's own altered life could be approached with rigor. He kept the legal pad. He built a timeline on graph paper spread across the basement floor, marking the events he could confirm, the gaps he could not fill, the places where the two versions of his life diverged in ways he could trace and in ways he could only infer. He found 17 differences he could confirm. Some were large. Priya, the quality of his relationship with Owen, the fact that his second marriage to Celia had never occurred. She appeared in his email as a colleague, nothing more. A research paper he had published in 2009 that he did not remember writing, apparently co-authored with Priya, on a formalism that had emerged from their early conversations and that had influenced the theoretical direction of his department for several years. Some were small. The gallery on 4th Avenue, a different dog owned by his neighbor, a golden retriever instead of the terrier he remembered, which meant some slightly altered afternoon at some shelter or breeder, some different choice made for reasons probably unrelated to him. The community center, which he had now looked up and found, had been funded largely by a local foundation, whose founding donation appeared, in a news archive, to have come from a woman named Rosalind Chen, who had chaired the foundation's capital campaign in 2005, and who did not appear in any of his records, but whom he now suspected he knew, in the loosest possible sense, at 1 degree of removal. He traced the Rosalind Chen thread for 2 careful hours. She was not easy to find. She appeared briefly in newspaper archives, in a neighborhood association newsletter, in the foundation's public records. From what he could piece together, she was a therapist in private practice, mid-50s, who had moved to Tucson in 2004 from somewhere in Central California and had, in the decade following, become quietly involved in community work. He did not know if she was the woman from the Civic. He thought she might be. He could not confirm it. The intersection records from 2003 were not digitized. There was no photograph, no contemporaneous account. He had only the geography of the changes, the way they spread outward from that moment in concentric rings, touching a conference in Pasadena and a community center and a golden retriever and the drawing on his refrigerator, and the fact that it was consistent with a woman who had been shown an unexpected small kindness in 2003 and carried it somewhere, the way people carried small things, invisibly, and spent them in ways they did not track. He sat with the graph paper and thought about this for a long time. On the fourth day, Priya came downstairs. She had given him space. He appreciated this and recognized it as a form of knowledge. She knew when to give him room, which meant she had learned him, which meant there was something here that had been built. She came down the stairs with 2 cups of coffee and looked at the graph paper spread across the floor and said nothing for a moment. "Show me," she said. He walked her through it. He was thorough. She was a physicist. She understood the formalism and did not need anything softened or simplified, and he was grateful for this in the way you were grateful for things you didn't know you needed until you had them. She crouched down and studied the graph paper. She traced a few of the lines with one finger. She was quiet for a long time. "The Chen thread is the most interesting," she said finally. "I know. If she's the woman from the Civic, and if the foundation work is downstream of what you did in 2003, then she's the primary effect and everything else is tertiary or further." She looked up at him. "The community center, do you know what programs it runs?" "After-school tutoring mostly. Some adult literacy classes. Have you looked at whether any of those participants end up downstream of something you can trace?" He had not. He had stopped at the community center itself, treating it as a terminus. He looked at the graph paper and then at Priya. "No," he said. "Because you're thinking about yourself as the center of the map," she said. It was not unkind. "You're tracing the effects that reach you, but you're not the center. Oracle Road is the center. Or she is. Rosalind Chen, or whoever she is the primary. And the map spreads out from her in all directions, most of which have nothing to do with you." He sat down on the basement floor. The graph paper surrounded him. "I changed her day," he said. Someone stopped. That was the whole thing. Someone stopped and asked if she was all right. "Yes?" "And 22 years later I have a drawing on my refrigerator and a community center I've never visited, and a neighbor with a different dog." "And a wife," Priya said. "Don't forget the wife." He looked at her. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor now, the coffee cups between them on the graph paper, her expression an even mixture of warmth and scientific interest that he was beginning to understand was characteristic of her, was probably one of the things. "I didn't change her life," he said. "I changed her day. Her life changed on its own from there." "People do that," Priya said. "You give them the material and they build what they build." She picked up her coffee. "That's not a small thing. Giving someone the material." He thought about the woman with her hands over her face, stopped in the intersection, the cars not touching but close enough that her body had understood the nearness of the alternative. He thought about whatever she had done with the afternoon after she drove away from him, whether she had called someone, whether she had been kinder than usual to someone, whether some encounter had gone differently because she was approaching it still warm from an unexpected human contact, some stranger stopping at a curb and asking in a plain voice if she was all right. He thought about how much of the world ran on this, on the thermal residue of small kindnesses, keeping some interactions a few degrees warmer than they would otherwise be, that warmth passing from one person to another in ways no one tracked, and everyone benefited from without knowing. "I can't undo it," he said. "I know," she said. "I know you can't." "Even if I wanted to." He looked at the graph paper, at the lines he had drawn, at the immense and humble fact of the life that had assembled itself around him while he was not watching. "Even if I could go back again, find the exact right thread to pull, there's no way to do it cleanly. It would change something else, and then I'd be here again with a new legal pad trying to figure out what." "That's the thing about the corrections," Priya said. She was looking at him with the direct attention he had noticed in her voice and was now learning in person, 17 years late. "They don't end. Every change is a new baseline. You can correct forever. Or you can stop, he said. You can stop, she agreed. He picked up his coffee cup. It was warm in his hands. The rosebush moved in the wind outside. Upstairs, he knew, the pothos was on the counter and the drawing was on the refrigerator, and the closet held evidence of a life he had not lived, but was apparently now living, which was the kind of problem that had no formal name because it had not, until recently, needed one. I want to visit the community center, he said. Okay. I don't know what I'll learn. I don't know if it matters. It matters, she said. Not the way you're thinking, not for the investigation, but you should go. She tilted her head slightly. It's a thing that exists because of something you did. You should see it. He nodded. They sat on the basement floor with the coffee and the graph paper between them, in the particular quiet of two people who were comfortable in the same silence, which was a kind of intimacy he had apparently been building for 17 years and was encountering for the first time this afternoon, and he thought, this is what I missed. Not the time, not the specific shape of the years. This, the way a person can sit with you in your obsessions and not need them to resolve, just to be present in them. He thought, I didn't know this was what I needed. He thought, she probably figured that out long before I did. Epilogue. He visited the community center on a Thursday. It was a low, pleasant building with large windows and a mural along the south-facing wall, an abstract thing in blues and oranges, clearly painted by many hands over many years, the kind of mural that was not one person's vision but the accumulated vision of many small contributions. There was a sign by the door listing the week's programs, laminated and slightly sun-faded. Adult literacy, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Homework help, Monday through Friday after school. A sewing circle, a citizenship preparation class. He stood outside for a while, reading the sign. A woman came out of the building while he was standing there, 50-ish, dark hair going gray, carrying a tote bag, and the end-of-day expression of someone who had done good work and knew it. She noticed him reading the sign and stopped. Are you looking for a program? She said. He looked at her. He did not know if she was Rosalind Chen. He did not know if she was the woman from the Civic, did not know if those were the same person or two different threads in the same web. Her face was not familiar. But then he had seen that face for 90 seconds, 22 years ago, briefly and from the side. I was just looking, he said. Someone mentioned this place to me. It's a good place, she said with the quiet pride of someone whose statement was understatement. Are you thinking about volunteering? We always need people for the tutoring programs. I might be, he said. I'm a physicist, retired. We have students who need physics, she said. More than you'd think. She smiled, a small and specific smile, and started down the walk. The director's in on Tuesdays. Come by. He watched her go. He stood outside for another few minutes, in the afternoon light, which was the same pale gold horizontal light that Tucson made in winter, regardless of what year it was or who had stopped at what intersection. Then he drove home. Priya was in the kitchen when he got back, reading at the table. She looked up. Well, she said. I'm going back on Tuesday, he said. They need a physics tutor. She smiled and went back to her book. He went to the refrigerator and stood looking at the drawing for a moment. The house, the sun, the stick figure family of 3, the word Dad in wax crayon. Then he went downstairs to the basement, to the workbench that looked like nothing and was everything, and he powered it down, carefully, completely. Every system, every standby circuit, every small light. He sat in the resulting quiet and thought about what it meant to stop correcting, to decide that the baseline was close enough, to accept the imprecision of a life as the unavoidable feature of a life, the thing that made it specific rather than optimal, real rather than improved. He thought about the network of small, warm things that ran beneath the visible surface of the world, keeping it a few degrees above what it would otherwise be. He thought about the invisible accounting of it, the way no one knew they were in it, the way it ran on ordinary days between ordinary people who mostly forgot by the following morning that anything of consequence had occurred. He turned off the light and went upstairs. It was Tuesday. He had somewhere to be. End.